Hello and welcome to the Opus Well Style podcast. We're here with another episode, and I'm joined with our guest today, Scott Shuman. Scott, how you doing today?
I'm great, Evan. Thanks so much for having me.
Awesome. Well, Scott, I'll let you introduce yourself in a moment, but I believe you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you're the COO of the Sue Adler Keller Williams team, and the intention today is to talk about real estate, the real estate market, some dynamics that you're seeing, and just give our audience just some insights and hopefully some actionable items that they can take away to help them in their lives. So, give us a little sense as to your practice and how you got into it, and what
Yeah,
you're working with and seeing to these days.
sure. Yeah, thanks for the intro. And it sounds like I came to the right podcast. I love talking about real estate, so excited
Let's
about
do
it.
it.
So we are, as you said, Sue Other Team. Sue and I are business partners in the team, and we have about 45 people between employees and agents. We
Mm,
call them agent partners. So between our agent partners and employees, we have about 45 people. Last year, we helped 325 families buy, sell, rent, or invest in real estate. Pretty much all locally in northern New Jersey. We cover Morris, Essex, Union, Somerset, Bergen counties in New Jersey, and really focusing on that train line, commuters coming, what used to be commuters predominantly coming out of the
mm,
city. Now that kind of work from home, half and half, whatever they're doing situation. And that made us number one in the Garden State MLS by over $100 million. And, certainly we've helped thousands of families over the past 14 or so years that I've been doing it. So a little bit about my background. Um, Oddly enough, when I was 15 years old and in high school, I thought real estate was cool. Everyone asked, well, why? And I honestly don't know the answer to that question. It was probably the advent of Million Dollar Listing or some real
mm.
estate show that came
We're
out.
all
And
we're all drawn to our calling for whatever reason,
I know, and I think, I probably was sitting there watching it and, seeing what these guys were doing, guys and girls were doing. And I thought, well, gosh, that guy just made $100,000 and he sold one house. Like, that's pretty good. I could probably do that, right? And of course, the glamour of TV was much different than
Yeah.
the reality of what the profession is. And yet, the draw to the entrepreneurial spirit of what you could build within the real estate industry was certainly appealing. So fast forward, I went on Amazon, and lucky for me, Gary Keller had written a book called Millionaire Real Estate Agent, and also had written a book called Shift, which was talking about how to succeed in the shifting real estate market. And they sold them as a bundle pack at a discount, which was amazing. And so I bought both. Here I am, a sophomore, junior in high school, and I bought the books and I read the book. And Millionaire Real Estate Agent literally outlines in about 300 pages how to go from nothing to making $1 million a year selling residential real estate. And I thought, I could do that. Yeah, this sounds fun.
Mm,
And at the time, so I'm originally from Massachusetts, Bedford, Lexington, Concord area. And my dad was in life insurance. He worked for MetLife, and he had gotten relocated to New Jersey. And so through that process, we had met Sue. And my dad said, well, hey, you're interested in real estate. Sue's a successful realtor. Send Sue an email, give Sue a call, see what
mm.
she can do. So I sent her an email with like 10 questions. And I remember she called me on my house phone. And she was so gracious with her time. She gave me like an hour of her time, and she went through all the questions. And her brother is in commercial real estate investing on the West Coast. And so she was kind of like, hey, listen, anything you want to do with real estate, residential, commercial, whatever you want to do, like, use me as your resource, and I'll try to guide you, help you connect with the right people. So I said, oh, that's awesome. My senior year of high school, we gotten a business teacher. My school had never had business classes, but we gotten a business teacher. And his big push for his first year was to do a senior internship program. And so the deal was that the last semester of your senior of high school, you got to go and do something in a profession you wanted to, investigate. You had to write a paper and do a couple other things, but you also got to do all the fun senior activities. And I'm like, well, okay, that sounds awesome. And so long story short, I called Sue. I said, hey, would you want free labor? She said, absolutely. Yeah, why not? And my first job, I joke, it's true though, I sat on an upside down 5-gallon paint bucket in what was our office 3 offices ago, waiting for the fire inspector to come and approve the sprinkler system that had gotten installed. And I remember going home that day. It was, by the way, this was like, I think it was the end of May or beginning of June. It was like 100 degrees, no air conditioning. I remember I was just like, it was just terrible.
Mhm.
But I remember going home that day and thinking, wow, that was awesome. I loved that. That was the coolest thing ever. And, fast forward, that ended, and Sue said, "Well, if I pay you, will you stay?" And I'm thinking, well, I was going to stay if I was working for
Right.
free. So yeah, you want to pay
Yeah.
me? Yeah, this is awesome,
Yeah.
And I went to school at the University of Tampa and studied entrepreneurship. And I worked briefly for a real estate team down in Tampa. This was 2010. It was really cool. And looking back now, it was really an instrumental part of my career learning process. Was Tampa, Florida, 2010, short sales, foreclosures, people walking away from their homes. Like
Mhm.
that was their market, and it just wasn't really our market. There's a little bit of it, but not so much. And so I was learning like what a short sale was and how you worked with it. And you had buyers and sellers. I came from a market where the average price point was say $800,000, and I went to a market where the average price point was like $125,000. But
Mhm.
I learned a lot about how agents can provide value to the transaction, and how we're really integral in the process of helping buyers and sellers transact, particularly in that time with foreclosures and short sales and all
Mhm.
that stuff. And then they had some big investment groups coming in, so I kind of learned that side of it. It was early on when like a BlackRock or somebody was coming in and buying, literal neighborhoods because they
Mhm.
were for sale, 50 cents on the dollar. And long story short, I've done basically everything, right? I've
Mhm.
gone from the intern on the five upside down 5 gallon paint bucket to now, partner and owner in the business. And, it's been an amazing journey, and, it's super exciting to help, families buy and sell real estate and create wealth, generationally through real estate. That's one of my big passions.
I love it. Any always love a good story on people finding their why, why
Yeah.
they do what they
Yeah.
do. But
I'm a lucky one.
you mentioned the shifting market. So over the last couple of years, I guess it's the start of 2024 as we're recording this, and obviously COVID had made it so that far less people are commuting into big cities, as well as higher interest rates than we had historically seen. So
For
walk
sure.
me through what you've seen over the last few years, how the market has shifting, and then maybe more recently, how people are kind of moving and responding to the interest rates being where they are.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of everyone's questions. All my buyers, all my sellers, all our clients have this same kind of general question. And I think it's really important to kind of understand the overall history. And so we've had kind of actually a couple different shifts over the past 4 years. So obviously 2019 into 2020, what people forget is 2019 categorically, prior to recent history and recent booms in residential real estate, 2019 was a great real estate year. I mean, there were a lot of transactions happening. Average price points were up, average sell price ratios were up, days on market were kind of in check. It's a pretty balanced market. Buyers and sellers were transacting pretty readily. I mean, it was a good market. And going into 2020, we were planning for more of the same. Of course, COVID happened, and everyone said, "Uh-oh, I don't know what's going to happen now." And it was definitely 60 days where we're sort of like, "Do we all need to find a new profession? Like, when does this all turn around, right?"
Mhm.
And you know, by March-ish, April, the world had kind of figured itself out a little bit, from kind of what people's next moves were going to be. And luckily for residential suburban real estate, the move was we don't want to be urban, we want to be suburban. And so the
Mhm.
phone just started ringing off the hook. And that's the impetus, right? That was the initial, how we got to where we are today is because of that initial
Mhm.
kind of boom moment, right? You had this prior to 2020, clients were staying urban longer. We were
Mhm.
having
Mhm.
families choosing to stay in Jersey City, choosing to stay in New York City, choosing to stay in Brooklyn or whatever that metropolitan area is near you longer. They liked that lifestyle. They liked the restaurants, the
Mhm.
nightlife. There were more family friendly, let's call it, services being provided in those areas. And so we were kind of feeling like that there was a migration, there was a shift in how people were migrating out of the city. It was coming later now, not as early as we had seen it, previously. Then COVID happens, and all of a sudden everyone says, no, 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 we don't want to be in the city. And even the people who had been in the city for 20 years said, no, 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 okay, we're out of here. We don't want to be
Mhm.
around this many people. We want to have the yard. We want to have the pool. We want to have the space. We want all of that. We need to work from home. We have a 2 bedroom apartment, 2 people working from home, 2 kids. Like this just
Yeah.
isn't going to work. Right.
Mhm.
And so, we got many of phone calls with screaming kids in the background and parents being like, oh my gosh, we need to get out of here. Find me a house today. Like whatever it costs, I'll buy it. But what happened was that drastically started to reduce, and you can kind of track it back to probably June of 2020. it starts to drastically reduce the amount of available inventory. So then what we had happen simultaneously was the people that were already living out here, we saw Western migration. So I'm in northern New Jersey, and so I'll use some of my towns for example. Any of the listeners know the towns; they'll be able to sort of geographically locate this. But we had people in Essex County, so say Milburn, Short Hills, Union County, Summit, Morris County, Chatham, that were saying, "Hey, we lived in these towns and we were paying a premium in purchase price as well as taxes because we needed that accessibility to the city." Well,
Hmm.
now that we don't need that accessibility to the city, why don't we move further west, which makes it slightly less commutable, but gets us a lot more house for the dollar, gets us a lower tax basis. Our kids are already in private school, let's just say. It's probably closer to their private schools. So we saw this kind of like double move. We had our city people coming out and moving to those, Milburn, Short Hills, Chatham, Summit, South Orange, Maplewood, Westfield, those towns. And then you had those residents, Madison, then you had those residents that were going, okay, now we have this availability to go to a Harding or a Mendham or a Chester or a Basking Ridge, Bernardsville area, and we can get so much more for our dollar. And so that helped keep the inventory levels kind of in check, right? Because you had the locals selling and either downsizing, moving out of state, or moving down the shore, wherever they were going, or they were moving kind of out of town and going west to get more for their dollar.
Hmm.
Then what happened, of course, is interest rates went up, right? And
Hmm.
so as interest rates went up, it became less attractive for the local homeowner to sell, right? They couldn't as readily go to Florida because they were kind of locked in at their low rate, and they're saying, well, it doesn't make sense to sell here and pay the
Hmm.
premium there and also pay a premium interest rate. Just doesn't make sense. And so that happened, but demand didn't stop. So supply just dropped, right? Supply
Hmm.
stopped coming, demand kept coming, and ultimately what you end up having was where we are today. And so what's interesting is if you look at most of our local towns, we're down somewhere, depending upon the town, between 75 and 90% from 2019. And so
Of
towns
transactions
of available inventory.
of
So
inventory.
transaction volume dropped off as well, not as drastically. And so what it signifies is that the demand is there. It's simply just the supply that's causing
You say the
this
supply
backlog.
drops 70 to 90%. Is that what you said?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's wild.
It's crazy. It's crazy. And so we have clients that say, well, Scott, I want to buy this house, but there's nothing for sale.
Hmm.
There's actually nothing for sale. Like that's the really tough part is, there used to be like a great example. Short Hills right now has about 15 homes for sale. In a normal January 2019, 2018,
Hmm.
somewhere in the neighborhood of 120 to
Wow.
140 homes for sale, right? So
So that's
you go
gotta
from
that's gotta push the price up with the supply demand imbalance.
pushes the price up, reduces the amount of available inventory for people to see. And, unfortunately, only one family can buy one home. And so if there's one home in your price bracket available for sale and that sells, there's literally nothing available. And so
Hmm.
what it's actually started to do is fan out the buyer pool across more towns because you can't really just look in one town. I
Yeah.
mean, you can, but you need to kind of have a situation where you can look for a year or
Yeah.
longer, right?
Hmm.
So what you have now is a lot more cross shopping. People are considering 3, 4, 5 towns because that's going to give them a little bit more available inventory. Or they're realizing, hey, my dollar doesn't buy me what I wanted in the town I wanted, so I'm going to need to go in and kind of look at another town in order to get a little bit more value for my dollar. So
So the
we're seeing a
demand
lot of
has stayed
buyers.
about steady even with interest rates going up. Is that mostly for new buyers?
Yeah. So here's what happened with interest rates. Interest rates were so low that we didn't realize it was a gift because we all
Hmm.
kind of got used to it, right? We said, well,
Hmm. Hmm.
money is free.
Took it
Money
for
is so
granted. Yeah.
cheap. This is great. And I think as a society, we all thought, okay, well, the average rate on a 30-year mortgage is 2.5 or 3%. And that's pretty good. I can do that, right? And then rates went to, 4 and people started to say, oh, I don't know. And then went to 5 and was like, oh my gosh, that's so expensive. And they got into the 6s and maybe even 7s. And people started to say, well, gosh, what I was able to afford in the past, I can't now. And the problem was that pricing didn't change, right? So pricing continued to accelerate
Yeah.
while interest rates also accelerated, making everything just globally more expensive. And so for about 6 months, there was a lot of confusion. You had a lot of buyers that were living in the rearview mirror. They wished that the market had been the way it was, or they wished they had bought that home a year ago, but
Hmm.
they hadn't. And you had new buyers coming in that kind of had heard this folklore of the 4% and the 3% and the 2%, but they were kind of living in the now and here and saying, well, I want a home and I need a home. And so they're 6 or 7%. It's what I got to pay and I'll refinance down the road.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're now in a place where, you know, interest rates have started to creep back a little bit. So they're seeming cheaper than they were. You know, they're off their highs of the last, you know, 52 weeks, which is good. And so we're seeing buyers coming back into the marketplace. You know, buyers that had thought it was too expensive are now re-engaging. You know, I think
What about
ultimately people
sellers?
are.
Are you seeing sellers come back?
Yeah, so just this year, you know, last year was we had a lot of locked in sellers. We had a lot of people who said, you know, Scott, I can get a lot of money for my home, but where am I going to go? And
Right.
I have this
You gotta
crazy
buy.
interest rate. I'm not going to give this up and triple my mortgage payment. That's crazy. What are you talking about? And that was, and rightfully so. I totally get that. I totally get that analysis. And now what you're having happen is just this year alone, the first week of the year, we got 3 specific phone calls that I'm thinking of where they didn't outright say it, but they had that tonality of, you know what, we're moving. Like we've kind of waited on the sideline long
Mm-hmm.
enough. We get it. Interest rates aren't going to go back down to 2 or 3%. And at this point, we just need a bigger home. We got more kids, we got more stuff, we got, you know, 3 dogs. I don't know what you got, but we want it. You know, we want the new construction, we want the pool, we want to move towns, we want a different neighborhood, we want a blue house, not a white house. I don't know, whatever it is, right? People are kind of getting to that point where they're a little pent up, they're a little cooped up, and they're saying, gosh, all right, at this point, you know, we're ready to make a move. And, you know, that's of course for the people who are fortunate enough to be able to afford that. We
Yeah.
definitely have, you know, clients out there that are locked in and are going to need to do some other things in order to unlock themselves, or the market's going to have to do some things for them to make that next move. And a lot of those people we're seeing doing construction. You know, my contractors are probably the busiest they've been in a very long time because the people who aren't moving are building. You know, I
Right.
believe that, you know, as a society, we are improvers. Like, you know, we buy new cars, not because our old car broke down, but because we want the latest and greatest, right? We
Mm-hmm.
buy the new TV before the Super Bowl because, you know, gosh, 4K was the thing and now 8K is the thing. Well, I got to have the 8K, right? Like it's just our society does that. And we have needs, you know, our families grow, our needs change, and we have to change our homes to meet that. So the folks that aren't selling and moving, I see a lot of them doing additions, renovating kitchens, reconfiguring floor plans to make it work, finishing basements, attics, adding pools, that sort of thing. I mean, contractors are slammed right now with work, just modifying existing homes.
Mm. What about, let's shift gears a little bit.
Yeah,
The people that are willing to sell, what are best practices on what they should be looking at within their homes, what they should be doing, whether it's
yeah.
renovations or small stuff to help with the sale price?
Yeah. So number one is find a trusted real estate advisor that you can meet with before you do anything.
Mm-hmm.
The clients that I see, you know, they sort of like it would be like going to agree to getting surgery before you actually meet with a doctor. It's like
Mm-hmm.
don't spend money that you don't need to spend if it's not going to get you an ROI, right? So find a real estate advisor that you trust and have them come in. It doesn't need to be perfect. It doesn't need to be clean. It's okay. We see houses in all different situations. I guarantee your home is not the worst we've seen. I promise you it's not. And that's where we can have these conversations of, you know, listen, some of my clients, it just makes sense to sell it as is. The land may be worth more than the home is. And I
Mm-hmm.
just say, hey, listen, don't spend a dime. Just live here, enjoy it. You know, if you want to sell now, 5 years from now, 5 months from now, 5 days from now, it doesn't matter. Whoever's going to buy it's going to buy it. They're going to renovate it, knock it down, do whatever with it. Don't touch it. If you're going to do something, do it for you, but don't do it for resale.
Mm-hmm.
Others, it's like, hey, you've renovated 99% of your home, and this is the, you know, the ugly duckling bathroom. Like, okay, let's spend the money to do the bathroom because it'll just cohesively make it all finish and it's money well spent. Or hey, don't redo your kitchen, just paint the cabinets or switch out the countertop. So a great real estate agent, a great real estate advisor is going to be able to give you the right steps to get your home ready for the market. What I see most of our clients needing is the following: decluttering, getting a plan ready to, you know, get rid of years of accumulated stuff. A lot of my clients have lived in their homes for 20, 30, 40 years, and,
Mm-hmm.
you know, their kids' bedrooms are still, you know, still have their art projects from, you know, kindergarten on their walls, right? And it's like, okay, we need to start combing through that stuff and deciding what goes where, what goes to storage, what gets donated, what gets thrown away, and kind of going through that cathartic process of getting the home ready for sale. I think that's step number one. Step number two is paint. The magic of paint is unbelievable. We can transform like literally any space that looks pretty ugly into like a showpiece with just a can of paint and some caulking and a good contractor can do that very inexpensively and make it look great and
Hmm.
allow the buyers to envision what that space would look like for them. Removing heavy wallpaper, heavy drapery, dirty blinds that need to be replaced, that sort of thing. I mean, just freshening it up is a
Hmm.
really inexpensive way to transform your home. And then staging. I mean, it's staging. I think used to be a new concept. I don't think everyone's completely bought into it, but my gosh, we have seen the benefits of staging. The ability to use your existing furniture as well as edit in new pieces or put on slip covers or change out artwork or just take down some artwork. And instead of having 10 pictures, you have 5 pictures. That can make all the difference in the world. Again, the goal of selling your home is allowing the buyer to envision themselves in
Yeah.
your home, and not them buy everything in your home, right? You're not selling your furniture with your home. You're selling the walls and the floor plan of your house, and that's what you really need to highlight. And so I think those three kind of quick tips are definitely helpful, great starting points for potential sellers.
I've definitely thought about this staging aspect. Like I know it depends on every situation is different, but what's like a
Yeah,
reasonable range to spend on staging? And then I
yeah,
assume you would only do that if you'd expect the sale price to go up by at least that much, right? And so
yeah.
what's your experience there?
Well, so I think staging is an investment in the property in two factors. One is sale price, and two is saleability, right? I think as sellers, we often forget about the factor of time, right? And so the more appealing we can make it, not only is the purchase price going to go up, but the time in order to sell it is going to go down, which benefits you as the seller. It's less holding costs, right?
Hmm.
And so staging helps in both factors. I would say that I have people that stage themselves. They go to Home Goods, they go to Marshalls, they go to Home Sense, whatever your local kind of cheap
Hmm.
knickknack place is, right? And they buy white linens and they buy towels and little bowl with lemons in it, and they spend a weekend and they like it and they have fun, and for 3, 4, 500 bucks, or if that, their house looks beautiful and it's staged and it's ready to go. To people that have empty bedrooms and no furniture or very dated furniture that needs to kind of all be omitted and new furniture to come in. And that probably, depending on the stage you're using and the size home you have, I mean, that could be $5,000 plus. I would say the average client is spending somewhere between, say, 2,000 and 3,500 on that home prep process, but they're getting it back, tenfold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold. I mean, it just totally transforms the showings on the home and the way that buyers look at the homes through that staging lens.
Got it. And what if, let's say you have a scenario, you have a client that maybe they did some work around the home and they didn't get the necessary or proper permits that they were supposed to. I'm asking for a
Mm.
friend of a
Yeah,
friend.
of
That's
course. Yeah, yeah, of course.
so this is being recorded.
Sure.
But what how does that impact the sale? And is there anything that you recommend there? Is it just a matter of, if the market's hot, then you'll be okay, and if not, then you got to lower your price? Like what's your advice there?
So okay, so permits are a touchy subject. I mean, you really, before selling the home, you should really kind of double back and make sure your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. And whether or not that's working through your building department at your town, or through an attorney that can maybe advise you on something like that, or through a real estate agent that kind of knows enough to get connected with the right people to give you the right answer to that. We've just seen too many things fall apart at the end over silly things that shouldn't have held up a closing. So I'll share a great example. We had a house in a town by us, and we represented the listing. We didn't sell them the home, but we represented the listing, and they lived there for probably about 10 years. And the town came to do what's called the CO, which is a certificate of occupancy. Some have a CCU, which is certificate of continued use. Every town's going to have different nuances of how in depth they inspect or not.
Hmm.
This particular town was pretty in depth, and they looked out in the backyard and they looked at the town always has a record of everything, right? They have a map of your home, they have what's
Hmm.
in your home, they look at old permits, when were things replaced, they kind of have a general sense of what's going on, right? They look out into the yard and they said, where did that shed come from?
Hmm.
And our owner was there and she said, oh, I bought it at Lowe's or Home Depot, and
Right.
8 years ago, and they put it back there. And he said, well, that's good. He said, but You had to get a permit to get the shed, and the shed has to be 6 feet off your property line. That's a foot off your property line.
Hmm.
And she's like, oh, okay. Like, I didn't know. And he said, okay. He said, well, great. He said, well, I'll give you the CO as soon as you move your shed over 5 feet and submit a survey with the shed drawn on it and all the proper processes. So luckily the buyer was cool and we were able to make it all work. But that took 3 weeks to find somebody to move an entire shed over 5 feet and then, have it drawn and resubmitted and have everybody sign off on it. And so I'm such a proponent of bulletproofing the transaction up front. So if there's anything that you know about or you're curious about, ask about it up front and let's make sure we deal with it. One of the things that we're doing with our clients now is we recommend they do what's called a pre-inspection. And so we'll have a home inspector come in and actually we call it a walk and talk. So he or she will kind of come in and give you major bullet points like, gosh, did you know you had knob and tube wiring? Or, hey, your roof is leaking, right? I mean, how many of us go into our attic once a week or once a month or once a quarter, right? I mean, many of us maybe only go up there to get down the holiday decorations and we don't look around all that much, right? We don't want to see the spiders hanging in the corner.
Hmm.
But when you go to sell your home, somebody's going to crawl through and look around and see everything. And what we found is when you know the issues up front, you're able to actually deal with them prior to putting your home on the market or disclose them as is. So that way it doesn't become an issue down the road.
Hmm.
Because the thing that derails most transactions in a major way is when these unknown variables come up. The buyer is always going to bring in somebody who's going to give you, we call it the Rolls Royce of repairs, right? So if anybody's ever done construction on their home and you get 3 quotes, there's always the high guy who wants,
Hmm.
10 times what it should cost, right? You have the middle guy who's probably the guy you should hire. And then you got the cheap guy who, says he can do it for $5 and a stick of bubble gum. And you're like, I don't even know how that's possible, right?
Hmm.
So you go with the middle guy. Well, what happens when you sell your home is the buyer always believes that the high guy is the actual cost,
Right.
right? You say, well, no, that's not reasonable. That my contractor or this contractor can do it for, half of that or a third of that or a fourth of that, right? And ultimately the buyer says, well, that's well and good, but there's no way that somebody can do it for that cost when this guy's saying this is what it's needed. And that's where that
Hmm.
log jam happens. And so what we like to do is kind of alleviate as many unknown surprises up front. That way, when you're in the transaction, you're pretty confident that the price you agree to the day you negotiate the contract is the price that's going to show up on the closing documents the day you close.
Got it. Well, that's helpful. Thank you. And I'm sure many of our
Yeah.
audience will say the same. But in closing or before we wrap up, anything else you think would be helpful to share with the audience? Anything on your mind?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're in this advisory wealth creation space, and so
Yep.
I think if we didn't take 2 minutes to talk about wealth creation through real estate, we'd be remiss. One of the greatest gifts I think that you can create for yourself is holding real estate. If you look at the folks out there who are the wealthiest in the world, many of them have significant real estate holdings, and many of them are creating rental income off of them. And
Hmm.
I think what I'm very interested in is the recent market. And if you kind of follow the path here, many people who bought their homes between say 2019 and 2022 own their homes cheaper than they could ever own them in the rest of their lifetime, right? They bought them at the right time in the market and they financed them with the right interest
Hmm.
rates, right? And so
Hmm.
that means on a monthly basis, your cost to own that home is probably, I mean, I don't have a crystal ball, but it's probably the lowest it will ever be in your lifetime,
Hmm.
give or take, but probably, right? Well, at the same time, rental rates right now are the highest they have probably ever been, right? And what that creates is the largest amount of delta between your cost and what you could rent your home for. And so, what I'm a huge proponent of right now is, of course, you have to be able to qualify to do this, but my sellers, my potential sellers who are thinking about upsizing or buying the bigger home or moving to a different town, I'm having conversations with them about holding on to their original asset. Why? Because they're owning something that has appreciation and is going to continue to appreciate while also throwing off massive cash flow. Now, if you're throwing off cash flow, what can you use that for? Well, of course, it's income to you, but I also educate them on, well, let's think about this for a moment. Let's say you bought a home for $500,000 and you got a 3% mortgage rate on it. You owed taxes, insurance, everything. You owed somewhere in the neighborhood of $2,500 to $2,600 a month, right?
Hmm.
Well, because you bought it at the right time, at the right interest rate, of course, right? Well, let's say that home is now able to be rented for $4,500 or $4,700 a month. Well, that's a delta of $2 to $2,300, right? That's profit above and beyond your mortgage payment. So what's
Mhm.
happening in this scenario is somebody else is paying for you to own the home. And on top of that, somebody else is on top of that, you're creating profit, right? Now, with that profit, you can use that as a coupon, if you will, to your new home. And what I
Right.
love to do is that quick math, right? So I'll say to my clients, hey, listen, yeah, I know you're going to buy this home and you're going to pay 6% interest rate on your bigger home, right? But what would your interest rate be if you subtracted the $2,000 in profit you're getting from your other home? In a lot of cases, they go, oh, it'd be like 3%. It would be the equivalent
Right.
of paying like 3%. And so for a lot of my clients, it's an easy way for them to say, oh, that makes sense. Now, that's the kind of in the moment benefit. Long term, what you're doing is you're creating an asset that's obviously throwing off cash flow long
Mhm.
term. I think I think there's this big misnomer out there about how complicated it is to be a landlord. I think if you're resourceful, and you have a handyman and you're able to answer the phone every once in a while and deal with any issues that come up, I think being a landlord really isn't all that complicated. I'm one, it's really not that complicated.
Mhm.
um and I think that at the end of the day, the benefits are huge. 15, 20, 30 years down the road, when this property is paid off, now you're throwing off, $5,000 a month in income to you, or you
Right.
have an asset that's worth, $1 million, and that pays for college, that pays for retirement,
Mhm.
that pays
Mhm.
for whatever, right? I mean, it's just such a great asset class that's diversified outside of the market
Yeah.
that I think more and more people should be looking at and getting into versus saying, oh, that's a rich person's game, or that's for people that only, have 800 properties. Like, I'm not that person. You can be that person. I think there's way more folks out there that own one, two, three properties and just keep it small and lean and mean and live a very happy life with that,
Mhm.
versus the ones that go out there and say, well, I'm going to become the next, tycoon and be the next Rockefeller. You could do that. But even if you just do one or two, I think you'd look back 10 years, 5 years and say, wow, that's one of the best things I've ever done.
Absolutely. Love it. Got to start somewhere.
Got
Well,
to start
Scott, this
somewhere.
has
And
been awesome. I really
yeah,
appreciate it. How is the audience best able to get in touch with you if they want some more of your wisdom?
yeah, I don't know if it's wisdom, but I definitely can talk about real estate. You can visit our website, sueadler.com, or you can always shoot me a note, Scott, SCOTT, at sueadler.com, and be happy to chat with anybody.
Awesome. And I'm sure we'll have you on here again at some point in the future. So
Would love that.
thanks for coming on to the audience. Thanks for listening and tuning in. Check us out on all of our channels, YouTube, Facebook. Give us a like, subscribe, 5-star review. We certainly appreciate it and read every one of them. So until next time, have a good one. See you then.